The Kurds are an ethno-linguistically Iranian group who have historically inhabited the mountainous areas to the south of Caucasus, a geographical area collectively referred to as Kurdistan. Most Kurds speak Kurmanji or Sorani, which both belong to the Kurdish languages. There are various hypotheses as to predecessor populations of the Kurds, such as the Kardachoi of classical antiquity. The earliest known Kurdish dynasties under Islamic rule are the Hassanwahids, the Marwanids, the Rawadids, the Shaddadids, followed by the Ayyubid dynasty founded by Saladin. The Battle of Chaldiran of 1514 is an important turning point in Kurdish history, marking the alliance of Kurds with the Ottomans. The Sharafnameh of 1597 is the first account of Kurdish history. Kurdish history in the 20th century is marked by a rising sense of Kurdish nationhood focused on the goal of an independent Kurdistan as scheduled by the Treaty of Chevreuse in 1920. Partial autonomy was reached by Kurdistan Uyezd and by Iraqi Kurdistan, while notably in Turkish Kurdistan. An armed conflict between the PKK and Turkish armed forces was ongoing from 1984 to 1999, and the region continues to be unstable with renewed violence flaring up in the 2000s. Name: the ethnonym Kurd may ultimately derive from an ancient toponym in the Upper Tigris Basin. According to some theories, it originates in Middle Persian as kwrt, a term for nomad, tent dweller. After the Muslim conquest of Persia, this term is adopted into Arabic as Kurd, and was used specifically of nomadic tribes. By the 16th century, there seems to develop an ethnic identity designated by the term Kurd among various northwestern Iranian groups, without reference to any specific Iranian language. Sharafzan Bidalishi in the 16th century states that there are four divisions of Kurds: Kurmanj, Lur, Kalhor and Guran, each of which speak a different dialect or language variation. Paul notes that the 16th century usage of the term Kurd as recorded by Bidalishi, regardless of linguistic grouping, might still reflect an incipient northwestern Iranian Kurdish ethnic identity uniting the Kurmanj, Kalhor, and Guran. Kurdish author Mehrdadizadeh conversely argues that any nomadic groups called Kurd in medieval Arabic are bona fide ethnic Kurds, and that it is conversely the non-Kurdish groups descended from them who have acquired separate ethnic identities since the end of the medieval period. As for the Middle Persian noun kwrt originating in an ancient toponym, it has been argued that it may ultimately reflect a Bronze Age toponym Kadu, Kardar, which may also be reflected in the Arabic toponym Gudi. The name would be continued in classical antiquity as the first element in the toponym, Corduene, and its inhabitants, mentioned by Xenophon as the tribe of the Kardachoi who opposed the retreat of the 10,000 through the mountains north of Mesopotamia in the 4th century BC. Alternatively, kwrt may be a derivation from the name of the Siashi tribe instead. Early history: Kurdish is a language of the northwestern Iranian group which has likely separated from the other dialects of central Iran during the early centuries AD. Kurdish has in turn emerged as a group within northwest Iranian during the medieval period. The Kurdish people are believed to be of heterogeneous origins combining a number of earlier tribal or ethnic groups including Luluba, Guti, Siashans, Karduchi. The present state of knowledge about Kurdish allows, at least roughly, drawing the approximate borders of the areas where the main ethnic core of the speakers of the contemporary Kurdish dialects was formed. The most argued hypothesis on the localization of the ethnic territory of the Kurds remains D.N. Mackenzie's theory, proposed in the early 1960s. Developing the ideas of P. Tedesco and regarding the common phonetic isoglosses shared by Kurdish, Persian, and Baluchi, D.N. Mackenzie concluded that the speakers of these three languages form a unity within northwestern Iranian. He has tried to reconstruct such a Persian-Kurdish-Baluchi linguistic unity presumably in the central parts of Iran. According to his theory, the Persians occupied the province of Fars in the southwest, the Baluch inhabited the central areas of western Iran, and the Kurds, in the wording of G. Windfer, lived either in northwestern Luristan or in the province of Isfahan. Muslim conquests in 641 AD, Arab commander Utba ibn Farqad conquered Kurdish forts of Adiabin. Around this time, Kurds lived a partly sedentary life and raised sheep and cattle in the regions of Beth Bagash and Beth Kartway above Arbel in Adiabin. In 696, Kurds joined the Khariji revolt near Hulwan. Under the caliphs of Baghdad there were numerous uprisings. In 838, and again in 905, formidable insurrections occurred in northern Kurdistan. The emir, Adad ad-Dawla, was obliged to lead the forces of the caliphate against the southern Kurds, capturing the famous fortress of Surmaj, whose ruins are to be seen at the present day near Bahistan, and reducing the province of Shirazor with its capital city now marked by the Great Mound of Yasin-Tep. One of the very well-known Kurdish scholars, al-Dinawari, from Dinawar near Kermanshah, lived in this period. He wrote a book about the ancestry of the Kurds. A Kurd named Nasser or Naseh converted to Christianity and changed his name to Theophobus during the reign of Emperor Theophilus and was the emperor's intimate friend and commander for many years. Naseh joined Babak's rebellion in southern Kurdistan, but Abbasid armies defeated his forces in 833 and according to the Muslim historian Tabari around 60,000 of his followers were killed. Naseh himself fled to the Byzantine territories and helped form the Kurdish contingent of Theophilus. This Kurdish force invaded the domain of Caliphate in 838 to help Babak's rebellion. After the defeat of Babak, Naseh and his followers settled in Pontus. The eclipse of the Sasanian and Byzantine power by the Muslim Caliphate, and its own subsequent weakening, let the Kurdish Principalities and mountain administrators set up new independent states. The Shaddadids of Armenia and Aran, the Rawadids of Azerbaijan, the Marwandis of eastern Anatolia, the Hassanwahids, Fadilwahids, and Ayyarids of the central Zagros are some of these Kurdish dynasties and principalities. Throughout Kurdish history after the Muslim conquests, there was a tendency for Kurdish tribes to move westwards as vassals of greater Muslim powers, from the Zagros to East Assyria and south-central Armenia, to West Assyria and West Armenia, to in modern times, migration of individuals into Western Turkey, Western Europe or even the Western Hemisphere. Kurdish migration into historic Armenia began in the 10th century and resulted in the establishment of the Shaddadid Emirate. Early Kurdish principalities. In the second half of the 10th century there were 5 Kurdish principalities. In the north the Shaddadid and Rawadid in Tabriz and Marageh, in the east the Hassanwahids, the Anazidim, in the west the Marwanid of Diyarbakir. Later in the 12th century, the Kurdish Hazaraspa dynasty established its rule in southern Zagros and Luristan and conquered territories of Kujaluya, Khuzestan and Golpagan in the 13th century and annexed Shushtar, Hovariza and Basra in the 14th century. One of these dynasties would have been able, during the decades, to impose its supremacy on the others and build a state incorporating the whole Kurdish country if the course of history had not been disrupted by the massive invasions of tribes surging out of the steppes of Central Asia. Having conquered Iran and imposed their yoke on the Caliph of Baghdad, the Seljuk Turks annexed the Kurdish principalities one by one. Around 1150, Ahmad Sunja, the last of the great Seljuk monarchs, created a province out of these lands and called it Kurdistan. The province of Kurdistan, formed by Sunja, had as its capital the village Bahar, near ancient Ekbatana. It included the vilayets of Sinjar and Shirazur to the west of the Zagros mountain range and those of Hamadan, Dinawar and Kermanshah to the east of this range. An autochthonous civilization developed around the town of Dinawar, located 75 kilometers northeast of Kermanshah, whose radiance was later on partially replaced by that of Sennar, 90 kilometers further north. Marco Polo met Kurds in Mosul on his way to China, and he wrote what he had learned about Kurdistan and the Kurds to enlighten his European contemporaries. The Italian Kurdologist Morello Galletti sorted these writings, which were translated into Kurdish. Ayyubid period. The most flourishing period of Kurdish power was probably during the 12th century, when the great Saladin, who belonged to the Rawandi branch of the Hadabani tribe, founded the Ayyubite dynasty of Syria, and Kurdish chieftainships were established, not only to the west of the Kurdistan mountains in Syria, but as far away as Egypt and Yemen. Kurdish principalities after the Mongol period. After the Mongol period, Kurds established several independent states or principalities such as Ardalan, Badanan, Babin, Sauran, Hakkari and Badlis. A comprehensive history of these states and their relationship with their neighbors is given in the famous textbook of Sharafnama written by Prince Sharaf al-Din Biltizi in 1597. The most prominent among these was Ardalan, which was established in the early 14th century. The state of Ardalan controlled the territories of Zadiyawar, Karnakin, Kirkuk, Kifri, and Horaman. Despite being vassals themselves of the various in Persia-centered succeeding Turkic federations in the region, namely that of the Karakoyunlu, and the Akkoyunlu specifically. The capital city of this state of Ardalan was first in Sharazor in Iraqi Kurdistan, but was moved to Sinnar later on. The Ardalan dynasty was allowed to rule the region as vassals by many of the sovereign rulers over the wider territory, until the Qajar monarch Nasser al-Din Shah ended their rule in 1867. Safavid period. For many centuries, starting in the early modern period with Ismail I, Shah of Safavid Azerbaijan, and Ottoman Sultan Selim I, the Kurds came under the suzerainty of the two most powerful empires of the Near East and staunch arch-rivals, the Sunni Ottoman Empire and the various Shia empires. It started off with the rule of Ismail I, who ruled over all regions that encompass native Kurdish living areas, and far beyond. During the years 1506 to 1510, Yazidis revolted against Ismail I. Their leader, Shah Sarim, was defeated and captured in a bloody battle wherein several important officers of Ismail lost their lives. The Kurdish prisoners were put to death with torments worse than which there may not be. Displacement of the Kurds, removal of the population from along their borders with the Ottomans in Kurdistan and the Caucasus was of strategic importance to the Safavids. Hundreds of thousands of Kurds were moved to other regions in the Safavid Empire, only to defend the borders there. Hundreds of thousands of other ethnic groups living in the Safavid Empire such as the Armenians, Assyrians, Georgians, Circassians, Azeris, and Turkmen tribes, were also removed from the border regions and resettled in the interior of Persia, but mainly for other reasons such as socio-economic and bureaucratic ones. During several periods, as the borders moved progressively eastward, with the Ottomans pushing deeper into the Persian domains, entire Kurdish regions of Anatolia were at one point or another exposed to horrific acts of despoliation and deportation. These began under the reign of the Safavid Shah Tahmasp I. Between 1534 and 1535, Tahmasp, using a policy of scorched earth against his Ottoman arch-rivals, began the systematic destruction of the old Kurdish cities and the countryside. When retreating before the Ottoman army, Tahmasp ordered the destruction of crops and settlements of all sizes, driving the inhabitants before him into Azerbaijan, from where they were later transferred permanently, nearly 1,600 kilometers east, into Khorasan. Shah Abbas inherited a state threatened by the Ottomans in the west and the Uzbeks in the northeast. He bought off the former, in order to gain time to defeat the latter, after which he selectively depopulated the Zagros and Caucasus approaches. deporting Kurds, Armenians, Georgians, North Caucasians and others who might, willingly or not, supply, support or be any use in an Ottoman campaign in the region. The magnitude of Safavid's scorched earth policy can be glimpsed through the works of the Safavid court historians. One of these, Iskander Beg Munshi, describing just one episode, writes in the Al-Amara-i Abbasi that Shah Abbas, in furthering the scorched earth policy of his predecessors, set upon the country north of the Araxes and west of Urmia, and between Kars and Lake Van, which he commanded to be laid waste, and the population of the countryside and the entire towns rounded up and led out of harm's way. Resistance was met with massacres and mutilation. All immovable property, houses, churches, mosques, crops, were destroyed, and the whole horde of prisoners was hurried southeast before the Ottomans should counterattack. Many of these Kurds ended up in Khorasan, but many others were scattered into the Alborz Mountains, central Persia, and even Balochistan. They became the nucleus of several modern Kurdish enclaves outside Kurdistan proper, in Iran and Turkmenistan. On one occasion Abbas I is said to have intended to transplant 40,000 Kurds to northern Khorasan, but to have succeeded in deporting only 15,000. Before his troops were defeated. While the deported Kurds became the nucleus of the modern Central Anatolian Kurdish enclave, the Turkmen tribes in Kurdistan eventually assimilated. Battle of Dimdim. There is a well-documented historical account of a long battle in 1609 to 1610 between Kurds and the Safavid Empire. The battle took place around a fortress called Dimdim, in Baradost region around Lake Urmia in northwestern Iran. In 1609, the ruined structure was rebuilt by Emir Zan Lepsarine, ruler of Baradost, who sought to maintain the independence of his expanding principality in the face of both Ottoman and Safavid penetration into the region. Rebuilding Dimdim was considered a move toward independence that could threaten Safavid power in the northwest. Many Kurds, including the rulers of Mukrian, rallied around Emir Khan. After a long and bloody siege led by the Safavid Grand Vizier Haytham Beg, which lasted from November 1609 to the summer of 1610, Dimdim was captured. All the defenders were massacred. Shah Abbas ordered a general massacre in Baradost and Mukrian and resettled the Turkish Afshar tribe in the region while deporting many Kurdish tribes to Khorasan. Although Persian historians depicted the First Battle of Dimdim as a result of Kurdish mutiny or treason, in Kurdish oral traditions, literary works, and histories, it was treated as a struggle of the Kurdish people against foreign domination. In fact, Baitir Dimdim is considered a national epic second only to Memuzin by Ahmad Khani. The first literary account of this battle is written by Fakih Tahrin.